Item 8L is to receive the study on the core-to-shore plan and also response to the findings on the MAPS 3 Transit Modern Streetcar Subcommittee, and Mike Mize is here to lead us through that process.
Mr. Mayor, as we've gotten into the planning process on MAPS, some folks in the community and council people actually said, how does things have changed since we originally adopted the core-to-shore plan, and now as we're going into MAPS 3, how do those relate? And so with that, we've tasked the ADG to take a look at that and to look at the existing core-to-shore plan and how that now folds into MAPS 3. Mike?
Thank you, Manager Couch. Mayor, council members, happy to be here. Just to set this up a little bit, a couple of things. The presentation that we're going to give is a summary of the actual report. The actual report, as I understand, was a part of your packet. It's much lengthier. This presentation's long enough, but the actual study's even longer. This was, as Manager Couch suggested, a study that was conducted for the purpose of trying to understand how specific MAPS 3 projects, specifically the Park, Convention Center, and Streetcar, might impact and have a change on the core-to-shore study that was done, I believe, in 2008. So, with that in mind, that's that was our goal. It was our charge. It was not to validate the 3 MAPS projects. The goal was to understand how they would affect core-to-shore and whether or not core-to-shore needed any major revisions. Just as a little bit of background, core-to-shore was a plan that involved the creation of a world-class pedestrian-friendly boulevard, development of a 70-acre downtown park, development of business and retail in that core-to-shore area, as well as mixed-use housing, development of a convention center and a convention center hotel, and probable relocation of existing businesses. One of the other things that needs to be remembered about the core-to-shore plan is that it was always envisioned as a 20 to 50-year plan, not a plan that would result in just remarkable or dramatic changes in the first 5 to 10 years, certainly changes, but this is a long-term plan that will be impacted by some of these MAPS 3 projects. Since the core-to-shore plan was developed, some significant changes have taken place in the downtown core in particular. Those changes you're all familiar with: the construction of the Devon Tower, Project 180, the renovation of the Myriad Gardens Park, MAPS 3 has been passed, and the relocation of I-40, the new boulevard, and the construction of the Skydance Bridge. So the purpose of the study, as I indicated before, was to put all of these in context and try to determine what kinds of impact they would have on each other and whether or not any significant changes were required for the core-to-shore plan. We used 2 nationally known consultants to participate with us in this process. They were the Jonathan Rose Companies and Hargraves and Associates. And as I said, this was to ensure the MAPS 3 initiatives are considered within a larger understanding of the context of downtown and the core-to-shore area. The following items were addressed: the impact of the location of the new convention center, requirements for the street level at the new convention center, the design of the new boulevard, which, as you know, is still ongoing, the impact of the downtown park on adjacent future development, the modern streetcar system as it relates to core-to-shore, the impact of MAPS 3 projects on walkability and transportation access in general. The methodology: we reviewed as much of the information as was available with respect to the MAPS 3 projects, with respect to core-to-shore, met with stakeholders and interested parties. I believe there's a list of those attached to the report, and identified issues which we think need to be addressed or considered as part of the design of the MAPS 3 projects. The findings represent a summary and compilation of the comments that were made by those who were interviewed. The authors of this study believe that consideration of each of these items is necessary to the overall success of MAPS 3 projects, and we found no major flaws in the Core to Shore study. I'll start with the first of the three MAPS 3 projects that was considered, and that's the Convention Center. The Convention Center, because of its location, should be considered a mediator between the downtown core and the downtown park, and also the Core to Shore area. The stakeholders agreed that the development of the Convention Center should enhance connections north and south rather than block them or inhibit them. The street fronts on Reno and the new boulevard in particular should be articulated so that they invite interface not only with the Convention Center, but interface with both parks, the Myriad Gardens Park and the new downtown park. There needs to be a strong pedestrian connection between the parks and downtown and Core to Shore. The new Convention Center has to have a strong pedestrian emphasis. Some express concern that the selected site might create a boundary as opposed to a way to actually provide communication and pedestrian access to between the two parks. Some express concern that express the fact that rather than hinder that pedestrian access, depending on how that convention center is designed, it may actually enhance that by creating inviting spaces at street level that would encourage pedestrian access between the two. Some of the issues that we recommended for further study, they need to carefully consider the issues that were on the preceding page. A strong focus on north-south connectivity and pedestrian interface needs to be made. The current use of the Cox Convention Center is almost two-thirds local use. That needs to be considered in the design of the convention center. Both residential and hotel development should be considered as options adjacent to the new convention center. A part of the convention center might be considered for private-public partnership development. Programming that can spill into the Myriad Gardens and downtown park should be included in the mix of uses. Input on programming should be discussed with the MAPS 3 Convention Center Subcommittee. The new boulevard, while it's not actually a MAPS 3 project, is obviously will have a significant impact on both the park, the convention center, and on the streetcar. So we considered the boulevard as well. Stakeholders are unified in the opinion that the boulevard needs to be pedestrian friendly. The overall number of traffic lanes should not exceed 4. It's my understanding that through dialogue with the city and with ODOT, the boulevard as it's currently planned has 4 traffic lanes and 2 parking lanes, so that objective appears to have been met. A median should be considered, which could be used to enhance pedestrian access and may actually provide a place for pedestrians to gather in between the traffic lanes. While it's the street could curve southward at the site of the convention center, the right-of-way for the boulevard is some 270 feet. 6 lanes of traffic won't take that up, so there's a possibility that that could curve southward and it would actually provide a little additional land for the convention center.
And ODOT is doing that.
Okay. I was not aware of that. Thank you. While it's necessary for the new boulevard to be depressed at the railroad crossing, we need to make every effort to make sure that that intersection is pedestrian friendly.
Mike, may I ask you a question? You're talking
Sure.
about pedestrian friendly, and I think that's a key to making the boulevard successful. In your discussions with the city and ODOT, has there been any conversation about the width of the sidewalks that are going to be adjacent to the boulevard?
I haven't had those specific discussions. I assume that those discussions are taking place as part of the communication between the city and ODOT.
The design is underway right now from ODOT, and we're awaiting their latest design to be presented back to us.
But if it doesn't provide for wide sidewalks, I think we ought to send it back to ODOT, because we're missing the purpose if we don't make the sidewalks wide enough for a pedestrian to feel comfortable walking along a 4-lane street that's moving traffic at 50, 60 miles an hour.
Well, the traffic won't be going more than...
Promise?
Yeah, I think ODOT's, I think the expectation is that it'll be 25 miles per hour.
Yeah, and so they'll drive 50. That's just observation, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
I'm going to stay out of your way when I'm on the boulevard. All right, Mike, go ahead.
That's fine. One other thing to be considered is the possibility of the boulevard merging into the street grid west of Walker. Other issues for further record? Yes, sir.
Well, on that other side, there's going to be 4 lanes of traffic and 2 lanes for parking, is it not?
Correct.
So the cars will be buffered from the pedestrians by the parking lane.
Yes.
So that's already part of the walker accessibility.
Without wide sidewalks, I don't care. You need to protect the pedestrians. We need to make it attractive not only for the pedestrians, but for the facilities, the retail we hope to see develop along there, to open up their stores, to put a couple sidewalks tables on the sidewalk out in front of their restaurants to have people sitting outside.
Well, I just wanted to make that point again, because in the original design, there was some talk that it would be a 6-lane of traffic boulevard, and it's not a 6-lane of traffic boulevard. It's 4 active traffic lanes and 2 parking lanes.
Correct.
That are involved. So it's a different concept. I think a lot of people out there think it's just six lanes of traffic zipping along there. That was my point.
There will also be room for an amenity zone like we put in Project 180 for landscaping and to further buffer the pedestrian walkways from the traffic.
As long as we don't build a typical 4-foot or 5-foot sidewalk like Oklahoma City does, I'll be happy.
Mike?
The recommendation that we've made, and which is actually, as part of this discussion has pointed out, is that ODOT and the city continue their dialogue so that some of these objectives will be considered and met within the context of the MAPS 3 projects. The next item was the downtown park. There's general consensus that the downtown park should serve as a catalyst for development, particularly east and west of the park. An aggressive strategy for development of those adjacent blocks will require significant participation both by the public and the private sector. As a large park, if you may remember, it's 70 acres, 40 acres upper park, 30 acres for the lower park. That's the lower park being south of the realigned I-40. It will have significantly different uses than the Myriad Gardens Park. That needs to be taken into consideration during the design of the master plan for the park. While Myriad Gardens provides programming for children and active adults, the downtown park could augment those uses and provide programming for young adults and other children. The location of urban and active uses near the boulevard is important to draw people into the downtown park. Union Station is a key element of the park. Its restoration and future uses need to be considered as well.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
I have, need to put my mic. I've had a number of opportunities in recent months to talk to people, Hispanics that were raised or grew up in the area that's south of the new interstate.
Yes, sir.
And the more I think about it, the less I like the idea of a bicentennial park approach, where you take every blade of grass out and build something new. There are a couple of features there: the old Riverside School and Manuel Perez Park, that are very, very important to the Hispanic community, I think, in terms of its historic attachment to Oklahoma City. I recently talked to Pat Fennell at the Latino Development Agency, and while they're looking for another place, one of the reasons they're looking for another place is because they don't think they're welcome where they are. And I think if we would try to save that school, it's an historic building, try to do something with that park, with the park that's there, the Manuel Perez Park. I think that would be a way to kind of bring in an element to this that we haven't discussed in the past.
It's interesting that you bring that up today. At the last park subcommittee meeting, there was a representative of the Capitol Hill and Latino area at the park subcommittee. And one thing you need to know, there has been discussion from the beginning at the park subcommittee, and this discussion has actually advanced and was a large topic of conversation at the last meeting, whereby considering some of the existing structures, some of the existing uses for the lower park is something that the park subcommittee is very concerned about and wants to try to take advantage as much as they can of the existing uses and existing structures. There's also a study that I believe is ongoing right now by planning to actually review and analyze the existing structures down there to determine which ones may have historic significance so that they can be earmarked for saving or repurposing. But that was a significant topic of conversation at this last park subcommittee meeting.
Well, when I talked to the people there at the Latino Development Agency, it was clear to me that they felt like they needed to leave there. They've looked for other locations. They've shopped around 2 or 3 places, but they felt like they needed to leave because they felt like that was the plan, that they were going to leave there. And every time I go by that school, I think if we could change once we clear all that out, if we could change the way the front of the street is very close to the front of that Riverside School, and they've had to redirect the entrance to the north side. But if more space could be provided on the front, similar to what the idea is to do at the Santa Fe station, by redirecting the street a little bit and putting that property onto the land where the development agency is, where the school is, I think they'd be very, very comfortable in staying there. And there's other kinds of assistance I think that we could be utilized to help make sure that building stays in place. It is really kind of a shame that we haven't done more with that park that's down there, considering who it honors and how it all arose. I just want to be sure that's included in in the conversation. I'm glad to hear the parks people are talking about it.
The park subcommittee is very aware of those kinds of concerns, and we are actually in the process right now of selecting a consultant, an architect/engineer, if you will, to develop a master plan for the park that would include that lower park area. But as I said, the subcommittee has made it known that is a big concern of theirs as well.
Well, the church is going to stay there, which is still a center for the Hispanic community, and it seems to me if you could keep those other, I'm being redundant. If you're going to do it, I need to shut up.
Just for a point of clarification, in the park take area is not. I
understand. It
is not planned for the Perez Park or for the Riverside School. Those are clearly outside of our take area. But I've heard the same type of comments,
right.
Councilman.
And I know they're interested. The people at the Latino Development Agency are having a problem trying to find a place to locate. They've looked a number of different places, and if they thought they had the support of the city and this plan to stay there, I suspect they might stay there. I was in a meeting recently at where a number of people were there, and this topic was brought up about maybe 6 weeks ago, and people literally were brought to tears thinking about the fact that Riverside School might eventually be torn down and not be the integral part of that Hispanic culture that they had grown up with. I mean, literally, there were people there that were that emotional about it. and also about the park. They feel like
you got to remember that that quarter shore diagram was not a plan; it was a suggestion. And a lot of the things that were shown on there were just that. It was an architect's idea of what it might be. And it's not limited to what's shown on that plan. And I think that's caused some confusion. People have given too much weight to what that plan shows. And it was more of a suggestion than it was a planned document. And I think that's important. We keep that in mind as we go forward.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons I'm saying something about it today, is let people know that that's not a blueprint. It's a watercolor, and we have an opportunity to change those things. And I believe there are people interested in both the projects I talked about.
Well, and really that goes back to the purpose of this study, was to find ways to interface core to shore with the MAPS 3 projects, and this park subcommittee is very concerned about what goes on adjacent to the park and making sure that that's viable as well.
I have one other thing. Are we going to actually see a trail built that is a trail all the way to the river? Are we going to? We're not going. I've been assured that we are, but I'd like to hear somebody else say it.
Mr. Cloud or Mr. Winger can address that better than I.
Thank you, Councilman. I think what you see today, as you look at the Skydance Bridge and the connections, is a sidewalk that's been constructed, an ADA accessible sidewalk that extends down to the north side of the bridge. There's actually a sidewalk that will continue down Harvey to the river, right by the park, that's under construction and should be finished shortly. But ultimately, as a part of the park design, you will see probably a trail that will actually connect that bridge, not next to the street, but through the park itself. And I think that's a concept.
I just like to make it very accessible. I mean, the whole idea of having that bridge there, if it's not very invitingly accessible, seems to me there's no point in postponing that aspect of the value of that bridge for 10 years. That's something we could fix with a little asphalt, it seems to me.
The interviews for the park were just held yesterday, and we're expecting that master plan be developed very shortly. Obviously, there's some early goals to have that opened in 2014 or portions thereof to align it with the new boulevard. But we want to give some architectural liberties to that consultant that's engaged to help us route that and make sure that it's compatible with the other park uses.
All right.
Your Honor, if I may make a comment, Pete, on Riverside, just an opportunity perhaps to encourage people to come to that park, because especially the southern part, it's going to be challenged to get people comfortable to come down there. We could consider possibly turning that into like an Oklahoma City museum, to where there'd be people coming in and out all the time, just to encourage usage of the southern portion of the park. I'm concerned if it was just the Latino agency itself, that might kind of be limited in use, but something to encourage people to use the park. And I would also suggest, because from my perspective, we had a problem with this at the Civic Center Park. If you put too many trees too closely along the side, it's actually non-inviting for people to come in. I mean, they're just concerned about what's inside that park. I think trees are important, but let's provide enough spacing. And then I think we've got to do something to encourage development along Robinson Avenue, the old Hubcap Alley area, to get people to come back down to that area who did not grow up there like Pete and I did. I mean, we're fine going over there, but outside of our little group, I think we really have to work to get people comfortable with that area again. And I think the best way is to encourage some type of commercial development along Robinson to replace those current businesses. But anything we can do to have people coming in and out, whether it's a museum or some other type of facility in the southern portion of the park, I think it's going to be critical to get people comfortable with using the park on a regular basis at all hours. And a museum tends to provide that, I think. Or, I mean, it could be. So, just those thoughts.
Okay. Mike, you want to go ahead?
Street parking on Robinson and Hudson can serve early on as parking and as a buffer to the actual park. We need to develop a comprehensive maintenance plan. There are some concerns about security that need to be considered as part of the design and the master plan. There is some support for the fact that if we build the park, it will result in development, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Parking right now is a perception problem more than it is an actual problem. And the general consensus of the stakeholders is that the substation can stay where it is now. Input on programming needs to be discussed with the MAPS 3 Downtown Park Subcommittee, and a plan for implementing strategies to develop the adjacent block should also be drafted or considered. And just as a side point, the Alliance for Economic Development is currently looking for a consultant that would help do exactly that. The modern streetcar. There was concern among many of the stakeholders with the streetcar. The questions that you see in front of you are questions that were posed by the people who were interviewed. There was concern about the demand, the market, the ridership profile, and some other concerns. There was also concern about clutter being created by an overhead wire system. Recommendations: the transit system needs to be sized properly. A consultant should be hired to study the current route and to assist in the actual design of the streetcar. Interviews for that consultant actually are going to take place in the middle of this month, so that process is underway. And options for powering the streetcar without wires should also be investigated. And I will point out that the next item on the agenda is a response from the streetcar subcommittee regarding this study. All three of the subcommittees were given an opportunity to provide a response. The streetcar subcommittee was the only one that did so formally. Additional overall observations. One of the significant observations was that the Court of Shore Plan itself did not look at what we refer to as linkages or its interaction with Bricktown, Midtown, downtown core. It was a fairly self-contained study that needs to be reviewed, and the Alliance for Economic Development is in the process, as I said, of trying to make that happen. We need to build on the successes that we have with the Myriad Gardens. We need to carefully consider the Cox Convention Center site and how it relates to everything. The redevelopment of the Sheraton Century Center block is something that needs to be considered. The boulevard could be considered as a way to bring people into the downtown core and into the neighborhoods in the near west side. As currently designed, and this, you have to remember, we did this study and completed this study in December. We didn't have the benefit of the current boulevard design, but it needs to do everything that it can to support mixed-use development and the creation of neighborhoods. Broadway and Robinson both right now serve as, in some ways, boulevards that provide for commercial development, and with the redevelopment of the Cox Convention Center, they can be considered even further for that purpose. In order to best leverage the public infrastructure investments in downtown Oklahoma City, we recommend that the city look at land use controls, developer incentives, and other ways to try and develop the areas, Councilman Greenwell, specifically adjacent to the park and adjacent to the convention center as well. Those things should be considered. Public-private partnerships need to be considered, particularly on city-owned parcels as well. Pedestrian access and pedestrian connectivity from the downtown core all the way to the river is something that was a key element of the conversations that we had, and that also needs to be considered in the context of Midtown, Downtown, Bricktown, and Court of Shore. And once again, the the development linkages are a key element for us in terms of recommending that the core-to-shore and the MAPS projects be considered in the entire fabric of downtown rather than just independently. Final conclusions, the core-to-shore plan as it sits does provide a great framework for growth for downtown. This is an opportunity to study it in context with other areas of downtown, and most critical is that there is as much overlap and coordination as possible in the planning of each of the MAPS 3 projects. And as in closing, I want to point out that I think we're well on our way to that. We're in the process, as I said, of hiring someone to do a master plan for the park. There is a consultant being process right now underway for the streetcar, and a consultant for the convention center I think will be solicited sometime in the next few months, so that there will be an opportunity for those subcommittees and for those consultants to work together. So we think that that part of the process is well on its way. And with that, I'll ask if there's any questions or comments. Councilman Shadid.
Let me ask, number one, what was the cost of this study?
$20,000.
Okay. Because you've gotten a lot of pushback on this study. I've listened to the transit subcommittee meetings. I think you had the vote at the MAPS Advisory Council was 5-3 to even accept this.
That's correct.
So you had 3 people who rejected receiving it. I have concerns about the methodology of the study. I have concerns about really even calling it a study. We have, and I know you've heard these concerns, but just to give voice to them, there are ways that you can take verbal statements and you can make data points out of them, and you can try and come to some conclusions. But you have to ask the same question to all the interviewees, which I took from your responses that I heard that wasn't done. And then you have to try and quantify what is a general consensus. Throughout the report we hear there's a general consensus about this, there's a general concern about this. Is it 15 out of 18 people? Is it 12 out of 18 people? And try and let us know, how much of a consensus there is. To me, it's a survey or a report of findings, it doesn't rise to the level of a study. So we've spent $20,000 and we interviewed 18 people over approximately 36 hours. Many of the people, we already know their opinions. The mayor, Meg Salyer, Gary Mars, Russell Klaus. I mean, we already know those 4, certainly. You've got 18 people, 15 male Caucasians, 3 female Caucasians. Nobody that I can see that lives or represents the south side of the city. You have 3 people from the Convention Center subcommittee, 4 from the Park subcommittee, none from the Transit subcommittee, none from the Parks department. I mean, it would seem to just ask the Parks department since we're talking about a 70-acre park and the core of the core-to-shore plan, what does the Parks department think about this? It is a core-to-shore plan. And so I don't understand that the marginalization of planners, not to degrade the qualifications of the people who are on here. I mean, you have a lot of business leaders, but no one really with planning and training and education, or education and training in planning. So if we're talking about the interaction of these different projects, transit, convention center, the river, on the core-to-shore plan, then it seems like we would interview planners. But we have 2 out of the 18 people have any background training in planning. I'd like to know about the experience in other cities. We have, in many ways, a replication of what's happening in Discovery Green in Houston. You have a CBD, a business district, and then you have the Myriad Gardens, which is like the Discovery Green in Houston, a very active park. And then you have the convention center, and hopefully our convention center won't look as god-awful as the one in Houston. But the question would be, what's happening on the other side of the convention center in Houston? I mean, one of the, you gave some voice to it, but one of the largest revulsions or apprehensions of so many people is that you're putting a convention center in between two parks. And you reference, I mean, this is a problem. You're trying to figure out how do we maintain pedestrian access and all. I mean, this is a real problem. Are you going to suffocate the downtown park? How are you going to develop a symbiotic relationship between the two with a large convention center in between the two? Those are major issues. And I think if we're going to call it a study, if we're going to look at, I mean, let's look at the experience in other studies. Houston has some real commonalities. And so more than just in 36 hours spending $20,000 to interview 18 people, most of whom we all know their opinions already. I mean, let's look at other cities, let's look at the experience in other cities and try and draw from that. I think that what you heard a lot of from transit, the resistance that you heard from transit, is that there's a concern that this is the groundwork for some kind of future pivot in policy and in allocation of funds, right? That this is laying the groundwork for reallocating funds away from certain projects that might not have the backing of the bulk of the interviewees towards maybe the convention center, for example. You go out of your way to say that there's general concern that the current budget for the convention center will not be sufficient to accommodate both space and design concerns. Then you say there's general concern among the stakeholders interviewed that the transit component of the MAPS 3 program has not been studied or planned thoroughly enough to justify the $130 million expense. But the transit system needs to be sized properly for Oklahoma City. To go out of your way to point out that the price tag of transit is $130 million when you didn't do that for anything else seems I understand how it would seem suspect to some people. And when there's a controversy about that sentence not being there, enough to justify the $130 million expense, it wasn't there, and then it gets added in by someone. And we're not sure exactly how it got added in or it wasn't there, but somebody went out of their way to add the words enough to justify the $130 million expense. So I'm not sure what the purpose of the study is. And one thing, I understand the concern and some of the pushback you've gotten that this may be laying the groundwork as a pivot and reallocation in the future on policy. Because I think to accomplish the things you're talking about on the convention center, I think you are going to have budget shortfalls and you're going to have problems. You went out of your way to discuss that we haven't talked about maintenance costs for the streetcar in the park, but not the other things, but not the convention center or other MAPS projects. I want to make sure that when you talk about that we want to minimize depression of the boulevard near the intermodal hub, that we're remembering or taking into consideration the findings of the intermodal hub study, that we may need to expand the wall for a third rail. And what they want is depression of the boulevard. And that I'm not sure if the interviewees are aware of that potential conflict or if that's being considered. But I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, Mike, you want to?
Could I respond to that just a second, Mayor?
Sure.
I sit in on every subcommittee meeting for the last year and attended, and of course, the advisory board itself for the past year. And I've talked to many people on all the different committees in an informal setting for the past year. And I never once heard anybody talk about reallocating money from one project to another, regardless of the project. Never once heard anybody say that we weren't going to do all the projects. And I never once heard anybody say they wanted to short one to fund another. So I think to lay that out as some unspoken motive of the study may be a little harsh. They were asked to look at the core-to-shore plan and its relevance to the now based on the MAPS 3 projects that were going on. It wasn't a study of transit. The comment about lowering the road and all that came up as a way to make traffic or pedestrian or anything else that might work. It wasn't a you need to do this. Absolutely, they weren't studying transit and they weren't studying the convention center. Those comments just come up. So I don't want to say that you shouldn't have the concerns you had. I just think that some of those, I just didn't hear any of that going on. I think that there was a lot of paranoia that jumped up that they might have been, but I never heard it once during any of the year that I was on there.
And let me just clarify. I'm not saying that anybody has ever said we need to reallocate funds. And I'm not saying that this study says we need to reallocate funds. What I'm saying is that some of the reason for the pushback and the concern about the study is a perception that this may be laying the groundwork as a pivot in policy in the future. Things that have not been said yet, but might be said in the future if you have budget shortfalls. And what is going to maybe increase the paranoia or the concern is that if you don't include interviewees from the transit subcommittee, for example, if you have people that you interview that have knowledge about transit and you don't ask them anything about transit, which apparently happened. I mean, this is a study trying to look at the different MAPS 3 projects and its interaction with the core-to-shore plan. You brought people in and interviewed them and didn't ask them about transit, which is a major MAPS 3 project that impacts the core-to-shore plan. We're going in a couple of ways. You say that the core-to-shore plan didn't explore enough the connections, to Automobile Alley and Midtown and all these different areas. Well, the streetcar is how you connect those areas. I mean, that is the vehicle to address that shortfall of the core-to-shore plan. But if you're not asking the people that you're interviewing as part of the study about transit, it's going to increase some of the concerns. And if you want to call it paranoia or just concern.
If I might, just two things. We did ask people about transit. We asked them for their views on transit, and some of them chose not to respond about transit. I will say that. And you said that you didn't understand the purpose. What the purpose of the study, and I think, is the concerns that you've raised are issues that we believe need to be considered, discussed, going forward in the future. There was no ulterior motive. The idea was to find out what kinds of issues are out there, what perceptions are out there, and to try to find ways to deal with them in the future, which is what we think we accomplished in the study.
I already know. I mean, I know where Rick Kane and Blair Humphreys and Russell Klaus and Kathy O'Connor and the mayor and Meg and Gary, I already know the opinions of. I mean, if that's all this is just a 36 hours of interviewing people that we already know their opinions, what did we get for that $20,000?
We really believe the study stands on its own merits.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mike? Yeah, David?
Mike, or really perhaps Jim, I think it might be helpful, at least from my perspective, if we could take a tour of the area where the park will be and just drive around that area, if that's possible.
Well, we'd be happy to do that. I think that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, and also, maybe if Russell, he's not in right now, could join us, we could take a side trip over to Capitol Hill and talk about the opportunities there for future development. And maybe, I'm being serious about this, is maybe we could invite a couple of people from the private sector who's shown the ability to be successful from a restaurant perspective about the potential to consider, especially if we, for example, kept something like the Riverside School open, putting in a restaurant there or going across the river into the Capitol Hill area. I think that maybe 30, 45-minute tour would be very helpful, at least from my perspective. And if it's appropriate to bring in outside or private individuals to that tour.
David, have I told you how much I appreciate you? Have I said that publicly?
No, but I'll accept.
I need to. I appreciate that very much. Are we going to hear from I see a number of people from the Transit Committee back here. Are we going to hear from them with regard to the response that? I'm asking. Are they here to speak about it?
Yeah. Okay. Mike, looks like we're through with questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeff, you want to speak on item 8L2, the response to findings from the MAPS 3 Transit Modern Streetcar Subcommittee on the Core to Shore plan?
Mr. White, thank you for calling me up. My name's Jeff Bezdek. I serve on the MAPS 3 Transit Subcommittee and our former Alternatives Analysis Committee. We just came, literally, if you needed us to be here to answer questions about it. We tried to take a very professional approach to the questions that were raised in the Core to Shore study. The majority of the committee unanimously forwarded those questions, and we tried to provide them as answers. It was the opinion of the subcommittee that this was a survey, not necessarily a study. And we were quite concerned that after many years of discussion and study by Jacobs Engineering and our planners, that many of those questions had been adequately answered. Now, granted, the route that has not made it before council yet, but was approved by the Oversight Board last week, does need to be vetted by a professional, and we're in the process of procuring that professional to vet the route, verify it, run more analysis on it. And of course, I'm sure that you've heard the issues regarding the alternatives analysis and federal funding. But the reality is, as far as the study is concerned, those questions we feel have been very adequately answered, and we tried to collate that information and spend a great deal of time doing so. And we were a little bit frustrated that ADG did not include those readily available answers to those questions in their study. Apparently, a modest attempt was made to contact our chairman to have him as part of the discussion, part of the study. No other attempt was made. He was not available, and Nathaniel is actually here today if you need to speak with him. But no additional attempt was made to contact our vice chairman, Zane Boatwright, or anyone else on the subcommittee. So, granted, in subcommittee meetings, many of you attend them. We're very passionate as volunteers. We're grateful for being appointed. We're grateful. We really enjoy serving you, and we can get quite passionate in those meetings. But when we make it through the Oversight Board and Council, we want the results of our committee meetings to be as professional as possible, and hopefully the response to findings you'll find adequate and without bias.
Jeff, thanks. Any questions for Jeff? Jeff, thanks for coming down. We appreciate your subcommittee's work. How about a motion then to receive item 8L1? Cast your votes. Passes not unanimously 7-1. And how about a motion to accept item 8L2? Cast your votes, and it passes unanimously.